User and hardware profiles. Both users and the computer store their own unique settings in what's called a profile. And in this video we're going to learn how to manage these profiles. Our user profiles come in three different flavors: a local, roaming, and mandatory. And our computer has its own unique hardware profile to store which settings it should use for its devices and its services. So first off, what exactly is a user profile? Well, it's a method to store custom desktop settings. For example, any wallpaper that we might have on our desktop, any display settings. It also includes information about shortcuts that we might have on our start menu, and any network and printer connections. The default location for a user profile when you perform a clean installation of Windows XP is located on your system partition. So let's go to that by clicking on My Computer. My system partition is on my C drive, so let's click on our C drive, and then the profile is located in Documents and Settings. So when you perform a clean installation of Windows XP, your profile will be located in the Documents and Settings directory. However, if you have upgraded from a previous operating system to Windows XP, the profile will remain in its original location. For example, in Windows NT, the profile will be located in WinNT/profiles directory. This directory contains unique profiles for all users that have logged on to the machine. So I have a profile for the user Frank, Tim, Todd, and the user that I'm logged on as right now, which is Training. Let's take a look at the user profile for Training by double-clicking on the folder. And we see all the unique settings that store application data for this user profile. Anything that's found on the user's desktop will be stored in this folder. My Internet Explorer favorite settings and my document settings, anything related to my network connections and network printers are stored here. All my start menu settings. And the computer knows to look for these settings and can reference those settings by looking at the user portion of the registry called ntuser.dat. The registry is a database that stores configuration information for all of your installed software, your hardware, and all the user information. And we can access the registry by using a registry editing tool. And in Windows 2000 there are two different registry editors, regedit and regedit 32. And it was sometimes a point of confusion determining when to use each version. Well, in Windows XP, both regedit and regedit 32 point to the same unified registry editing program. To open the registry editing tool, click on Start, then click on Run. And in the Run command, either type in regedit or regedit 32. Let's choose regedit, then click on the OK button, and that fires up our registry editor, which displays its information in a hierarchical fashion, and all of our user information is contained in HKey users. Let's expand that. And in Windows XP and other NT-based operating systems, all users are uniquely identified by what's called a security identifier. And each of these folders that start with the little letter S with some numbers after them represent each unique security identifier, which in turn represents all of our user profiles. The user profile for the person who's currently logged on is found in this location, HKey current user. So I'm currently logged on as the user Training, and all the custom desktop settings and all of my settings in my user profile are found in this key, which in turn finds all this information by referencing the file that we just looked at called ntuser.dat. So for example, the wallpaper that's displayed on the desktop is referenced in the registry within Software. So if we double click on Software, then slide down to Microsoft, expand the Microsoft tree, then find Internet Explorer, and within Internet Explorer we're looking for Desktop, and within Desktop we're looking for General. And then on the right hand side we see a registry value called Wallpaper, and this value would contain the file path location to the wallpaper that's being used to display in the desktop. So that's the 1, 2, 3s of the user information that's stored in the registry. Let's close out of here. So the question that remains now is, how does a user profile actually get created? Well, it's created when a user logs on to a computer for the very first time, and the computer is going to look for a base profile in a series of locations to copy and use for the new user. Let's take a look at that process by bringing up a slide. When the user logs onto a computer for the very first time, the computer is going to look to see if a profile has been created ahead of time for the user to use and it was placed on a server. And this is called a roaming profile. And we'll see how we can create a roaming profile after this section. If a roaming profile had not been created ahead of time for the user, and the answer to that question is no, then the next action the computer will take to try to build a profile is to look for a standard profile called default user on a domain controller SharePoint called NetLogon. The SharePoint is a default SharePoint and exists on all domain controllers. It's typically used for administrative purposes such as logon scripts. If no default user exists within NetLogon SharePoint, then the last step that the computer will do to build a brand new profile will be to look for the default user profile on the local computer's hard drive within Documents and Settings. So let's take a look at that process. Let's minimize this. Let's go up one level. We're now within Documents and Settings, and if you notice here, there's a folder that says Default User. The default user profile is created during the installation process, and this profile, if we double click on it and take a look inside here, contains all the base standard settings that all new profiles will be created from. So if we go back up one level, what happens is when the user logs on from the very first time, such as training, the contents of default user will be copied into training. And the end result of that is we have what's called a new local profile, and a local profile is stored on the computer's local hard disk, and that means that any changes that you make to this profile will only be found in this computer. If the user training logs onto another computer, a brand new local profile will be created on that machine with its own unique settings. Well, in addition to our local profiles, each and every one of these profiles we'll see here also reference one other profile that's listed here, and that's called All Users. The All Users folder contains settings and shortcuts that are referenced by any user that logs onto the system. So for example, when the training account logged on, it'll look at all the unique settings within its own profile, but it'll also look and reference any of the settings that are contained in All Users. For example, if we take a look inside here by double clicking, every single thing that we see here will be available to the training account and any other user that logs onto the system, hence the name All Users. So for example, if you were to install the Microsoft Office suite of applications, it will place shortcuts within All Users, Start Menu folder, Programs folder, and within here, if we scroll down a little bit, we'll find in this example shortcuts for Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. The end result of placing shortcuts within this folder is that when any user logs onto the system and they click on Start and select all programs, they'll find those shortcuts to run those applications. And the reverse is true as well. If you go into the All Users folder and were to delete any one of these shortcuts, well, that shortcut would be removed for any user that logged onto the system as well. So the profiles that we've been looking at are called our local profiles. The Sally, the Tim, the Todd, the training, all of these are local profiles. However, what if, for example, we wanted to set up a profile for ourselves, our administrators or our help desk users, and have that same look and feel and all those settings to not only be on our computer but also to be on other computers. For example, let's say for our computer we've got a folder called Toolkit, and that folder contains all of our troubleshooting and diagnostic utilities. Well, that's on our desktop, and if we get a help desk call and we have to log on to another user's machine, it would be nice if we could have all of our settings and our toolkit to follow us from machine to machine. Well, we can implement that by something called a roaming profile. So let's pull up a Scratchpad and see how this works. So right now our profile is located on our local machine, and in order to allow our profile, let's say it's down here right now. We've got our administrator profile with the toolkit on our desktop on this machine, and if we want to log on to any other machine, we would have to recreate that profile from scratch. So what we want to do is take the profile that's on a machine, let's say this machine for example, and upload it to a server in our Active Directory domain. So once the profile has been uploaded and the user account is trained to look for the profile up on the server instead of their local machine, whenever they log on to any other machine in their environment, that profile will come down from the server and make a copy of that profile on the local machine. So hence the word roaming. It's kind of following you around the network. So now I don't have to recreate all my settings that I had on this machine right here manually for every single machine that I log on to in the network. So let's see how you actually create a roaming profile. It's pretty straightforward. The first step is simply to set up your computer with all of your unique settings that you'd like to roam around with you in your network. And so you'd create any shortcuts, any settings, any start menu configurations. So once you've got your computer primed and ready to go, the next thing to do is open up the System Control Panel, and we can do that by right-clicking on My Computer and then choose Properties. And then from the System Properties Control Panel, we're going to the Advanced tab, and then from here there's a section called User Profiles. So we're going to click on Settings, and this displays all the user profiles that are on this machine here. So you see here in this dialog box we have a combination of local profiles, we have an existing roaming profile, and lastly we also have a mandatory profile on this machine. We'll look at mandatory profiles after our roaming profile discussion here. So what we need to do now is take the profile for the help desk user that had set up all their settings, and we want to copy that information up to a server. Right now I'm logged on as the user called Training. If you notice, when I select the training profile, the delete button and the copy to button become grayed out. They're inaccessible. And the reason for that is because I'm logged on as Training, my profile is locked down. The ntuser.dat file can't be copied up to the server because I'm logged on with that file. So what we'd have to do is log off as the user that we created the profile for, then log on as an administrator and come to this dialog box and then select the profile, and then we can click on the copy to button. In this example I'm going to use the Todd profile as my guinea pig. So Todd is not logged on right now, so we can click on the copy to button. Let's do that right now. And the next step is to provide the network location that we want to store the profile on. And we can do this in one of two ways. We can type in the universal naming convention path, or we can click on the browse button to find the SharePoint that we want to place the roaming profile on. So let's click on the browse button and cruise our network here. Go to My Network Places, Entire Network, Windows Network, our domain, a server in our domain, and I created this SharePoint ahead of time called Profiles. And the next thing I have to do is specify which directory in Profiles we should copy this profile up to. So we're going to create a directory called Todd. And then lastly, if we wanted to allow other users to use this profile that we're going to copy up to DC Nuggets profiles, we'd have to change the permission from not only Todd but to allow other users to use the same profile. We'll see how we do that in our mandatory profiles discussion. So we're going to click on OK, and at this point it's starting to copy up all the settings that are on this local machine up into that server, and we're good to go. So now that the profile is on the server, we have to instruct the user account to use the roaming profile instead of using their local profile. And because these are domain-based accounts, we have to use our domain-based administration tools to instruct our user accounts to use this roaming profile. And that's done by installing your administration tools found on your Windows 2000 or Windows.NET Server CD. I've done that ahead of time, and the end result of that is when we click on the Start button, then choose All Programs, we get another folder here called Administrative Tools, and the tool that we need is Active Directory Users and Computers. So we'll open that up, and it's connecting to a domain controller. So the next step is to edit the user account Todd properties to tell it to use the profile we've just uploaded, and that's done by selecting the account, right-clicking on the account, choosing Properties, and the tab that we need to click on here is called the Profile tab, and within the Profile Path field we type in the Universal Naming Convention path to where we had just uploaded our profile to. So that's DC Nuggets, and that's profiles and Todd. So to finish off the process, we click on the OK button. So now when the user Todd logs on, it's going to use its roaming profile instead of the local profile. So we've covered local profiles, roaming profiles, but we still have a third profile called a mandatory profile. Let's take a look at that next. So far what we've done is created a profile that can now roam around our network and visit us and follow us from machine to machine to machine. Well, we can also use this same strategy of creating a roaming profile and have a company standard look and feel as well. So let's say, for example, you work for a bank and you want to make sure that the settings for all bank employees and the desktop wallpaper displaying the bank logo will be on every single machine that a person logs on to. Well, what we can do is create our bank profile on a machine, upload that as a profile up to a server, and once we've done that, we need to lock down the profile. So we've got our profile up here in the server called bank. However, any user as a default can make changes to that profile. So you spend all this time and energy setting up all the custom settings, the shortcuts, the default properties, but a user can change any of those settings at will unless you lock that profile down. And we lock the profile down by creating a mandatory profile. And we can create a mandatory profile in Windows XP in one of two ways. First off, all the settings that control the bank profile are contained in the file called ntuser.dat. And we can convert the profile to a read-only profile, which will prevent people from making permanent changes to the profile by changing the file extension of .dat to .man, or which is essentially short for mandatory. Another method that we have in Windows XP for creating a mandatory user profile is renaming the directory that the profile is contained in. So let's say, for example, the profile was contained in a directory called bank. Well, what we can do in Windows XP is rename that profile as bank.man. Now, this can act as a little funky in production. It takes a lot longer to log onto a machine using this type of method, and in order for this method to work, you have to point all of your users to this profile right from the get-go. They can't have a local profile created on their machine, or else this won't work. This profile has to be created ahead of time. You'll have to point the users to this profile before they ever log on to this machine. But this is a second method for creating a mandatory profile. Just rename the profile directory to .man. So let's take all this information and put it to practice. Let's create a mandatory profile. We're going to do that by going into our System Properties control panel. So let's click on Start, select My Computer, go to Properties, go to the Advanced tab, and let's go back to our User Profiles dialog box. So you would first log on as a user, maybe called bank, and set up all the settings for the company's standard look and feel, the bank logo, all that fun stuff. And in this example, I'm going to use Todd again as the guinea pig. We're going to pretend that Todd is our bank profile. So we're going to click on Copy To, and then we'll copy this up to the server. So this time I'm going to type in the UNC path. Helps if I can spell here. And then profiles is the SharePoint. And in this situation, we'll say that bank is the directory that we're going to place the profile in. And in my last example, I said you can also call the directory called bank.man. Mad. Yeah, the employees will be mad once they get this profile. Bank.man to make this a mandatory profile. Let's use the most common method, which really is the most reliable method, and simply rename ntuser.dat. We're not done here yet. We have one more step, and that is to allow everybody to use this profile. So right now, the only person who's permitted to use this profile is the person who logged on and created the profile. So the next step is we have to click on the Change button and allow all of our users to use that profile. So we're going to do that by clicking on Advanced, click on Find Now, and we'll just scroll down here and find our users. All the way down here at the bottom, and here we go. Click on Okie Dokie, And okay, so now everybody can use this profile, which is all well and good, but as a default, all those users will be able to make changes to that profile. So once this is copied up, we're going to have to rename ntuser.dat to ntuser.man. And we'll do that once this is done. So that's done. Let's close out of here. And let's go up to the file server. So I'm going to connect to the server using a UNC path from a run command. So let's click on Start, click on Run, and then whack whack DC nuggets, and then profiles. And once you put in the backslash, a nice feature in Windows 2000 and Windows XP, it's automatically reaching out to the network and it's showing you all the folders and directories within a SharePoint. So let's go to Bank and open that up. So nested down here is our file called ntuser, and it's called ntuser.dat. We need to change the view options to show the file extension, so let's do that. So we can display the file extensions by going up to the menu bar, choosing Tools, Folder Options, click on the View tab, scroll down here just a tad and deselect Hide Extensions for Known File Types, and click on Okie dokie. Now let's scroll down, and now we see the file ntuser.dat. Just pressing F2 to open that up, and just rename this to ntuser.man, and now this has created a read-only profile that prevents users from making a permanent change to the profile. Now the last step that we have to do is tell all the users to use this profile. So let's do that next. Now all the bank employees are domain-based accounts, so we need to install our domain administrative tools to tell our domain user accounts to use this profile. So I've previously installed the domain administrative tools, and we can access those by clicking on Start, choose All Programs, and then access Administrative Tools. And the one that we need is Active Directory Users and Computers. And this particular version of the tool comes from the Windows.NET CD. This version of the tool and the application that you use to install this tool is called adminpack.msi. There's a Windows 2000 equivalent of this tool, but in order to manage a hybrid environment of Windows XP machines and Windows 2000 machines, you need to use the version of this tool that comes with Windows.NET. And you can download this from Microsoft's website, or from you can get this from a Windows.NET CD. So we're going to find our employees, select those employees. Let's say, for example, the Tim account or the Gladys account, or how about the Bill account. Select Bill, click on the Profile tab, and then tell Bill to not use your local profile anymore, Bill, but use the profile that's on a profile server at this SharePoint, and you're going to use the bank profile. So that's the very last step you'll have to do to complete the process of not only setting up a roaming profile, but also for setting up a mandatory profile, is pointing the user profile properties to where the actual location of the profile is. Now, any roaming profile or mandatory profile that we create that's a server-based profile, as a default, a locally cached copy of that profile will be created on any machine that you log on to. And the benefit of that is, if ever the domain controller that you try to log on to is not available, you can log on with your locally cached credentials, your locally cached profile. But there's a gotcha with that with Windows XP. There's a new group policy which could prevent you from logging on to a domain using your cached profile. So we can view this new group policy using our Windows.NET Server version of Active Directory Users and Computers. Let's take a look at the group policy on this organizational unit called CBT Nuggets. We're going to right-click on it, choose Properties, and then go to the Group Policy tab, and I'm going to open up an existing group policy. And then from here we're going to our Computer Configuration node, expand Windows Settings, expand Security Settings, expand Local Policies, and then lastly expand Security Options. And then from here we're going to scroll down just a tad, and we're going to the Interactive column, and as a default there's a new policy here called Interactive Logon, number of previous logons to cache, in case the domain controller is not available, and the default setting is 10. So that means if 10 users have logged on, I'm going to log on your I'm going to cache your logon settings for up to 10 people. Now, the thing you have to watch out for is if this setting is changed from 10 to 0, that will prevent anybody from logging on to their machine if the domain controller is not available. Now, this setting is typically used for security reasons. It'll prevent a person from logging on to the desktop with domain credentials that have been cached if they're not connected to the network and they're not connected to the domain. However, so you got to watch out for this little gotcha. If this is changed from 10 down to 0 here, you're going to get an error saying you can't log on. Thanks for playing, try again. So do watch out for that. So that finishes our look at user profiles, but our computer also has a profile called a hardware profile. So Windows XP uses hardware profiles to determine which services and drivers to load, and a computer can use hardware profiles to enable different hardware configurations. And this is most typically done on laptop computers. So for example, you can run a laptop in a docked or an undocked state. A docked state means that you've taken the laptop and you've plugged into a docking station, and the benefit of that is you can attach to that docking station additional peripherals, such as maybe you've got a large 21-inch monitor connected to that docking station, and maybe a different keyboard or a different type of mouse and other type of peripherals all connected to that docking station. Well, these are all hardware devices that have all their own device settings and parameters and drivers and maybe services as well. So we have all of our devices and services related to the computer while it's running in a docked state. And that information is contained in a separate hardware profile. And when we remove the computer from its docked state and run it in an undocked state, the computer loads all the devices and drivers that are related to all the peripherals that are used in an undocked state. So it's not going to load, in this instance, the drivers that are related to the 21-inch monitor over here because it's not connected to the computer anymore. So the benefit of that is, since we're not loading additional drivers and devices, we're not consuming as much battery power, but also that could cause conflicts too with other devices that we might have here. So if we're trying to load a device driver for a 21-inch monitor that doesn't exist, we could have some errors and configuration problems. So let's take a look at how you configure and manage hardware profiles, and that's done within our System Properties control panel. So let's click on Start, select My Computer, right-click, Properties, and here we go. We're going to the Hardware tab, and from here all the way down at the bottom we have a little button that says Hardware Profiles. And I'm running on a desktop computer, so we're looking at the default single hardware profile. If this was a laptop computer, and automatically it would create a docked or an undocked profile for that laptop computer. So for example, if we look at the profile properties, we see that this computer is not a portable computer. If we're running a laptop computer, this would have a little check mark saying this is a portable computer or a laptop computer. So for this example, let's pretend that this is a laptop, and we're going to create another profile called Airplane and disable devices for that profile to conserve battery power while we're flying on business trips. So to create our Airplane hardware profile, we'd select our existing profile, click on the Copy button, let's call it Airplane, and click on Okie dokie. And if you notice now, we've got two profiles. It's pretty straightforward, but on the right hand side, this little black arrow became bold. We can set a priority in which the profile should load. If you notice down here at the bottom it says when Windows starts, what should I do? Well, the default is select the first profile. In this instance is profile number 1 listed, and if I don't do anything at a menu option when the computer boots, automatically boot into profile number 1 after a 30-second delay. So you can change the default priority. So in this example, Airplane, since it's at the top of the list, the computer would automatically boot into the Airplane profile after a 30-second delay. Or you can choose this option, say don't automatically boot into the hardware profile, just wait until I manually choose profile airplane or profile number 1. If at some point you no longer need a profile, you can simply select the profile and delete it, so that way you won't be prompted to choose a hardware profile each time you start your computer. So our last step we'd have to perform to conserve battery power would be to restart the computer in the airplane hardware profile, then go to our computer management console, and we do that by clicking on Start, select My Computer, right-click My Computer, choose Manage, and within here choose the Device Manager and simply disable any devices that you don't need while you're on the airplane, such as your network adapter. So let's select our network adapter, right-click, and disable. And additionally, we can disable any services that we may not need while we're on the airplane as well by clicking on Services. Find a service that we don't need, such as DHCP, right-click on that service, choose Properties, then click on the Logon tab, and then below you see the different hardware profiles to choose from. So we could select Airplane and disable that service for that hardware profile. So those are the steps that you take for setting up and configuring hardware profiles. And that brings us to the end of this video, where we've learned how to set up and configure our user profiles. We learned the difference between local profiles and our roaming profiles, and how to lock down our profiles from permanent changes by enabling a mandatory profile by rename ntuser.dat to ntuser.man. And lastly, we've learned how to conserve battery power by creating separate hardware profiles. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.